Okay, so we're going to take a look at this coin toss game. It says toss a coin how many is many, times, and for each head, add 1 to a counter, and for each tail, subtract 1 from the counter. Display the counter versus the number of tosses. So I guess after 10 flips, if it was 5 heads and 5 tails, then the counter would be 0. But if it was 7 heads, that'd be positive 7, 3 tails, subtract 3, it would end up being 4. So I guess on average, we would expect that thing to come up to a 0, but that's kind of what the program will test. So rather than coding it directly into Python, I'm going to use EduBlocks. So remember we took a look at EduBlocks. It's a block-based, and someone was reminding me that that we looked at this, and it might be easier for some people, particularly when you can't just ask me a quick question as to why something's not working. So we are using random, so I'm going to want to use random or random. Now our variables, we're going to have a counter. So I'll call that counter. And I'm going to want to set my counter to 0 at the very beginning. We're going to have to figure out how many flips. So number of flips. And we might as well set that to a number of flips, set that to a random number. So under our random variables, is there an assignment? Okay, I can choose a random integer. So I need to, no, it's probably, is it math? Oh no, it's right in my variables. I'm going to take my number of flips. So I don't know how many is a lot of flips. So I'm just going to generate a random number for how many times the program's going to run. And every time I run it, it will be different. So it's going to be a random integer. And I want to go random integer between. I know that this requires 2 numbers between the value, I'd say 100 a lot of times, 1 to 200. In this program here, I've done random numbers. Larger numbers tend to cause the program to hang. Replit is better. So later when we copy this code into Replit, we can adjust those numbers. So that will generate a random number, and that's going to tell me how many times I want to flip my coin. So I'm going to loop through that number of times. So I'm going to use my loops. So this is a counted loop because it'll be a defined number. Maybe it's 112, but it's a while true is an uncounted loop. This is the counted loop for I in range. Now, normally what I do is I put both a start and a stop number when I do my loops when I'm coding. But if I just put one number, it automatically assumes the first number is 0. So it will end up count. If I say for I in range bracket 10, it's going to go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 0 through 9, which is a total of 10 times. So rather than this being a number, it's going to be the number of flips that that's going to tell me how many times I'm going to loop through. So that's my variables. And I'm going to I need to check to see. I'll make my the result of my flip. So I'll make another variable called result. And that's going to be a coin toss between 1 and 2. So I'm going to set my result variable to a random value, a random integer between 1 and 2. Now, interesting, there is a random choice. I could put a choice of, in quotation marks, heads, comma, tails. But the user is never going to see what this really is. I just need to choose between 2 items. So whether the items are 5 and 7, heads and tails, 1 and 2, really doesn't make a difference. I'm just going to say, let's assume 1 is head, 2 is tail. So I'm choosing a random integer between 1 and 2. Now what I can do is I can do a logic statement. I can check to see if it's a 1, then it's a head. If it's a 2, it's a tail. So under my logic, if what's true, if my result is equal to 1, logic, not equal sign, there we go. So if, take my variable result, if that's equal to 1, then that was a head, and we're supposed to add 1 to our counter. So I'm going to take my counter variable, and instead of assigning it equal to something, there's also an option to increase it by add to the variable the value of 1. So take a random integer. If it's a 1, we count that as a head. So if it's a 1, then we're going to increase our counter by 1. Otherwise, logic, else. If it's that, add 1, else subtract 1. And that will repeat a lot of times based upon between 1 to 200 times when I run my program. And then I'm also supposed to print out the number, my counter versus the number of flips. So statements, I'm going to print. So print, I can either print a variable or I can print some sort of text. I don't see the ability to add, in Python, when I'm typing, we can separate within inside of this, we can add a comment to add multiple things. So print bracket. I think I'm just going to do my own code. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to print. I mean, here, let me not do code. I'll say, let's print two things, print and print statements. The value of your counter is, I'll put the counter variable, and then another print statement after this many flips. What I'm going to do, no, after this many flips. And then that will be the the number of flips is this counter here for I in range, the number of flips. So if it's 100 flips, it starts off I is 1. Actually, I will be 0, and it will print. I want this variable I. So variables, there should be an I variable now. Oops, Control Z. Nope. Right, okay. So after this many flips. So I is going to be increasing. Let's imagine it was 105 flips. It'll be something after 1 flip, after 2 flips, all the way up to after 104 flips. So now I'm going to try running this code and see what it does. Run. Now, I think this is going to work, but let's try. Come back again. I worry that somehow the video is interfering with the ability for it to run. Just a reminder, we can switch back to Python code. EduBlocks comes in and automatically adds these values to the variables. We don't actually need that when we copy and paste it, but we're going to import random, set our counter to 0, decide on the number of flips, a large number of flips. I could hard code that and say I want 112 flips, or then make a loop from 1 to the number of flips, or 1 to 112. Generate a random number between 1 and 2. If the number is 1, my counter is increased by 1. Otherwise, it must be heads, or it must be tails, 2. Subtract 1 to my counter, and then print out the counter and print out how many flips I've had. So this is going to print many, many, many times. Let's try running it one more time. Actually, I'm curious. Yeah, I'll try running one more time, and if not, I'll try running it in Replit. I'll copy the code. Connecting. Okay. So we can see that the number of flips minus 10. So after 105 flips, minus 11. Then it must have been a head, and then another tail. In this particular run, after 125 flips, tails went out 14 times. But if I run it again, so the code looks like it's working. A little bit wonky, but I think that's the approach. And then, so if you decided to do it here in EduBlocks, you could, so first of all, you could always save this. And then you want to come in and rename that right away so you remember what it is. There's also this option under settings that allows you to export the Python. Again, you'd want to rename it. And once you have a Python file inside of Replit, right, if I say new Replit here, Python, I'll call it coin toss. I can upload a file. Upload file, and I could grab my untitled Python file. Now that's it there. As I said, I don't think we really need that, but I can take this code. It has to be inside of the main program inside of it for this to work. But if I run this now, that's great. And here I can, I'd rather put this all in one line, so I could put the value of counter is colon, comma, counter, comma, after, comma, I, comma, flips. That will be all in one line now, which I prefer. And if I run this now, so tails went out 5 times after 174 flips. I run it again. This time it was 190 flips. If tails went out again, that time heads ran out. But notice that Replit will take much larger random numbers. That's between 1,000 and 20,000. So that was 1,189. Heads won out by 8. So you can see it'll go. You can kind of see how high a number you can go up until it craps out. So after 15,000 flips, tails happen to win out this time, but that's the concept. Okay.